How's it going, everybody? My name is Adam, and I am indeed a musician. I play music, and I talk about music for a living. And I'm here to talk to you guys about music. You've heard of music, right? Just making sure. Because it does seem to be an intrinsic part of the human experience. It's a part of every culture across the globe and has been since the dawn of civilization. But since we're here and might as well define it, let's try and actually come up with a definition. So music is, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the science or art of ordering tones or sounds in succession, in combination, and in temporal relationships to produce a composition having unity and continuity. And I love this definition because it somehow manages to be too vague and too specific in a way that only dictionary definitions can be. But it's actually a pretty good definition because any kind of music that you could think of across any culture fits this definition quite nicely. Gregorian chant fits this definition. Ghanaian Adsiag Bekwar drum patterns fit this definition of music. Javanese gamelan fits this definition of music. But the problem here is that there are things that are not music that also fit this definition. Like, for example, right now, I'm ordering sounds in succession, in combination, and with temporal relationships. The order in which I speak my words matters to the overall continuity and unity of the composition of my speech. So, according to this definition anyway, language is a music, or maybe music is a language. They both seem to communicate things, albeit in different ways, through sound. And I'm not the only musician who thinks this. A lot of musicians and music cognition researchers seem to think that there is a relationship between how humans use music and language. It's been called the universal language before, but I'm not entirely sure if that's accurate. I think there's a little bit more nuance there. The French anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss would write that music is the only language with the contradictory attributes of being at once intelligible and untranslatable. And I'd like to explore this a little bit about why I think that music is intelligible as a language and why it's also untranslatable as a language. And it relates directly to an experience I had, in fact, the reason why I wanted to become a musician in the first place. I was 14 years old, and I saw a concert at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., held by the late, great jazz pianist Dave Brubeck. And he was accompanied at the time by the jazz bass player Christian McBride. This is me backstage with Christian McBride at age 14. I'm 14, not Christian McBride. And at the time, I was learning how to play music. I was in the beginning stages of learning how to play the bass guitar. And I was also learning a little bit about jazz music, the music that these guys were playing. I knew that jazz was an improvised music, but I also knew that improvisation didn't mean that you could just play whatever it is you wanted and call it jazz, like play random notes on your instrument, although I've definitely done that before to varying degrees of success. Anyway, I'm going to show you guys what I mean by this. I'm going to play something on my bass, I'm going to improvise something, and just to prove that this is improvised, I'd like for somebody out there in the audience to shout out the name of a key, like the key of C. Does anybody have a suggestion for a key for me to improvise in? F, okay, so this is Ode to TedX in the key of F. Okay, I got a question for you guys. What do you think I'm thinking about while I'm improvising? Do you think that I'm thinking like the names of the notes that I'm playing? Like, I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna play an F now, then a D, then an E, then a C, then an A, then a B flat, or whatever. The truth is that it's actually very similar to having a conversation with somebody in daily life. You know, if you think about just your mindset when you're having a conversation, you're not really, reading from a script. You're improvising the conversation, but you're also not inventing new language to have your conversation. What you're doing is you're recombining all of the vocabulary words that you've learned over the course of your life, and you're recombining in the moment in a way that makes sense to you, and hopefully makes sense to the person with whom you're speaking. And the reason why this works is because there's this underlying structure, this grammar of language, which governs which words can go where. It governs the temporal relationships of the sounds that you speak. And this syntax defines well-formed sentences. Adjectives go here, nouns go here, verbs go here. And because you know that syntax quite well, you can access your vocabulary and recombine it in the moment to have a meaningful, extemporaneous conversation. And that's exactly the same thing with music. When I saw Dave Brubeck and Christian McBride play, they were having a meaningful, extemporaneous conversation before me. They were recombining all of their musical ideas, their vocabulary that they had learned over the course of their careers in the moment. And they did it in a way that made sense to me. And I looked up at them, and it was like they were having this, I'm going to call it a debate, maybe. They were having this repartee back and forth in this fluid arc of musical ideas. And they were telling a story with a logic that I could understand. And that was very exciting for me because it just seemed so joyful. It was really exciting to watch. At one point, they were laughing, and Christian McBride, I remember him letting out a woo, which is how you know the jazz is especially good. So it was in that moment that I knew that I wanted to do this. I wanted to become a musician. I wanted to have these meaningful conversations with people, and I wanted to be able to speak this language that these guys were speaking. So I studied jazz improvisation, and the more I studied, the more I realized that, yeah, this is a form of communication. Maybe I can't quite articulate how I'm communicating, or what I'm communicating, but I'm definitely communicating something. And I've learned a little bit more since then, and I'd like to share with you guys exactly what I'm thinking of while I'm playing. So I could play something right here. I'm going to play a chord. A chord is any time that you have more than one note at the same time playing, I guess, on your instrument. This is a G major 7 chord. If you must know, it's a spread voicing of a G major 7, G, D, F sharp, B. But for a jazz improviser, what you're thinking of is you're not really thinking of this as just a chord. It's more of this abstract idea, this concept, this category, really, under which other ideas can be filed. So, yeah, this is a G major 7, but this is also a G major 7. And so is this. And so is this spaghetti-looking thing. And so is this. Each one of these contains notes from the idea of G major 7. They are iterations of G major 7. They are manifestations of the Platonic ideal of G major 7. I'm going to be so philosophical. The technical term for these are voicings. And a good way to think about this is they each give voice to the idea. They sound similar. They're almost synonyms of one another. And when an improviser studies music, what they're doing is they're coming up with pieces of vocabulary that are used to express this idea. You can play different little melodic patterns that might express the idea of G major 7, different little like scales, different little licks and stuff like that. There's different ways of actually expressing the musical idea of G major 7, and the net effect of it is that I can just think that idea in my conscious brain, and I can express it because I have the vocabulary. So if I'm playing, I don't know, I'm just going to noodle around right now. All I'm thinking of is just G major 7. And if I shift my conscious brain to think another idea, like maybe A flat major 7, you'll be able to hear that. You're able to hear the shift. I'm now in a different idea. And then maybe if I shift my idea once more, maybe I'm going to shift it to E major 7. See if you can hear the moment that I shift it. And you heard that shift. Something changed in my improvisation there. And I think that's the exciting thing and why I think that music really is a language, because I had a thought, I manifest it through my vocabulary, and you understood when that shift happened. Maybe you weren't able to label it as E major 7, but you understood it. I was able to communicate my idea through my vocabulary in the same way that I communicate my ideas through the language that I speak. Exactly what E major 7 means, I can't really tell you, because like Claude Levi-Strauss would say, Music is the only language with the contradictory attributes of being at once intelligible and untranslatable. You can't translate that idea of E major 7 into something else. It's just what it is. Music is untranslatable. If you were to ask me a question right now, like, what are you doing, Adam? And I might respond, I'm giving a TEDx talk. There's a logical relationship between question and answer. I can ask musical questions too. Like, for example, this might be a musical question, and this might be a musical answer. You can hear the logic there. We call this antecedent and consequent phrases. Antecedent, question. Consequent, answer. And you hear the logic there that can be explained musically. For example, the first phrase ascends melodically, and ascending melodic phrases contain tension that's compounded by ending that first phrase on the 7th degree of the scale, which is the leading tone. For historical and acoustic reasons, the leading tone has a fair amount of dissonance, tension, which is resolved at the beginning of the consequent phrase, the tonic, and that resolves the tension, which is then compounded by going down the A major arpeggio down to the tonic at the very end of the consequent phrase. Okay, great. Thank you. Music theory, okay. So there's a logic there that you heard, you understood. I didn't need to explain all of that stuff to you, you just heard the relationship. And because you understood, at least on some sort of level, the relationship between question and answer, it produces in you a sort of satisfied feeling, right? It's like a satisfactory response of question and answer. Tension, and release. I want you guys to pay close attention to that tension and release in this next question and answer pair. Because that feeling, the feeling that's going to be induced, is salient to my point about music being a language. So check this out. Here we go. Okay. So that's funny, and the reason why it's funny is because you expected this to happen earlier than it did. Leonard B. Meyer calls this embodied musical cognition. Expectations set up in the music itself produce musical meaning. That moment was kind of an anxious moment. You felt that there's like this tension there because I didn't fully resolve that the diatonic tritone out to the tonic chord. You felt that tension right there in a very real way. I didn't have to explain to you the tension. I could say the word anxiety, and you don't feel anxiety. I could say the word happiness, you don't feel happiness. I could say the word jealousy, you don't feel jealousy. But all I have to do is go like this. And you feel something. And it's only because of the vocabulary and the syntax of music, the language of music, that you're able to feel that thing. And for this reason, I think that music is the language. Music is a language with a direct line to experience. Let me try that again. Okay, music is a direct line to experience in a way that natural language simply isn't. The composer W.A. Matthew would write that perfect clarity does occur in music. One learns to compose or perform all of what the moment carries, but I never feel like words completely say what aches to be said. The philosopher Susan Langer said that a composer not only indicates but articulates subtle complexes of feeling that language cannot name, let alone set forth. And so when I was preparing for this talk, I was trying to think about the best way of explaining how it was that I felt when I was looking up at Christian McBride and Dave Brubeck improvise and have their musical conversation. And I really can't articulate that feeling into words, because the only way of articulating that feeling would be to be there in that moment and have Christian McBride and Dave Brubeck improvise for you all. Trying to explain that feeling is kind of like trying to explain what the color red is to somebody who is blind and has never seen anything before. You can exhaust your vocabulary of the most poetic descriptions of how red makes you feel and the meaning of redness, and also throw at them like the wavelength of red and get into the scientific definitions of what red is, but until you actually see red, you haven't experienced it. And that's the same thing with music. In that example earlier of, the shave and a haircut thing, that was like one example of meaning that was transferred to you directly as a feeling. Imagine how many subtle shades of feeling there are in a symphony that maybe you're not consciously aware of, but you're feeling quite directly. My mom is also a musician, and she says that music provides a clarity of emotion. And I think this is why whenever you go to a wedding, it would be really weird to not have music. Just think about it, a wedding without music, that'd be very strange. And I think the reason for that is because in order to properly express the joy of the community and also the love of the couple, you need music there in order to articulate that clarity of emotion that language alone would not be able to give you. If you think about the music that means the most to you personally, chances are it's because it's helped you find a certain clarity in yourself that language alone would not be able to provide. And so this is what I want to do with my own music making and my own teaching. I want to try and find a clarity of emotion in myself and help other people find that clarity as well. And the only way that I know how to do this is through the vocabulary, the grammar, the syntax of the language of music. Thank you very much.